Hello and welcome to episode 212 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we have quite a bit to talk about. We have been gone for a little bit over a week, almost 2 weeks now, since Major 1. And since Major 1, there's been a lot of news, some roster changes, an entire roster being wiped off the face of the earth, which is fairly unusual for it to happen mid-season. We also have a Call of Duty Legend getting released, as we had talked about for a long time, and a lot of other just weird stuff happening over the last few weeks. But before we get to any of that, how are you doing, Bink?
Yeah, doing all right. Like you said, been a little bit since last show, but honestly, it's been a bit of a quieter, a little, I want to say roster mania period, but it really hasn't been. I think we were both, well, I was both expecting more teams to make fewer changes, but because of the one squad wipe you kind of mentioned, like technically there were several roster changes. It's just actually only impacting two teams. Um, but we'll get into all that first and foremost. Hope everyone had a happy little break here over the last week plus, and had a good time watching the Super Bowl and all that stuff. Even though the game itself was pretty unentertaining. And spring training has officially started for baseball. It's baseball season, which is a big thing for me. So, any other spring training enjoyers, happy first day of spring training to you. But for most of the listeners, you're here for the Call of Duty stuff. So, enough yapping for me about non-COD stuff.
I think it's right when you say that it felt a little slow or a little quieter than we thought, because the rumors before, or I guess right after Major 1, was that pretty much the entire league is making changes. Like, half the league is going to make a roster change or already has made one, which was kind of a weird way to phrase it, I think. In reality, we're going to have like half a dozen new players in the CDL, but it's just contained to basically two teams right now, or three teams, and I think that's what it feels, very contained in that way. But I think we should get right into it. I want to leave the squad wipe to the second part, because I think the biggest part is really LA Thieves officially announcing the release of Kenny and the promotion of Nium, who they signed as a substitute, on loan from the Huntsman, which is Optics Challengers team. They did that during the Major 1 qualifiers. And of course, we've been talking about Kenny pretty much this entire season. I was very adamant before the year that this roster just wasn't up to snuff, that replacing Ghosty, even though it might not be a one-to-one necessarily with how their play styles work, but replacing Ghosty with Kenny seemed like a really bad idea, especially with how poorly Kenny played last season. And then, we're through Major 1. LAT didn't do as poor as we thought they might at one point during the qualifiers, but they certainly did not compete for the championship. And now Kenny is off the roster, and Nium, who has never played in the CDL, is coming into the roster into a championship level team, and a lot of expectations. So just, I know we've talked so much about it. We've given pretty much a month or two worth of discussion into Kenny and Nium and LAT, but now that is a finally official, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, I mean it's you know a kind of a little bit of a double-edged sword for Nium, in my opinion. I mean, it doesn't have to technically be a bad thing in any way if he just comes into the roster and absolutely fries and LAT become the super team that people envisioned the original roster would be. But it's high expectations for somebody who's entering his first CDL opportunity. And you can look at it as he has the support staff and the veteran presences around him to help him in his transition and help him get acclimated to the pace of play at the CDL level. But at the same time, you can look at it as Kenny was, I don't want to say necessarily the scapegoat, because we've documented at this point, and I'm pretty confident he would even admit to his underperformance at several moments for this LAT team. But feels like if this roster fails for LAT as well, that Nium could be a very easy scapegoat. And then we're looking at a situation kind of like Lunars to an extent last year, where this kid Nium was hyped up, Lunars was hyped up last year, enters a team that's not performing up to standards, or not playing very well, and then it kind of just goes through the motions. And obviously Lunars didn't get dropped as a result of that, but that is just one outcome I could foresee happening. But hopefully for Nium and LAT and all them, he just comes in and fries, and it doesn't even matter. It would be pretty good if this is the change that makes LAT more competitive, because we've already been discussing at multiple points this year how competitive the top of the league has been. And if Nium comes in and is this, world beater type player that people are expecting him to be, that just, in the long run gives us more high octane matches, and I'm all for it.
Yeah, they are not in the worst position that they certainly could be. They're not in a position like Optic was when Mercules came into the roster last season, where they were a real risk to not even make champs. This is very early in the season, certainly before Major 2 qualifiers, when we have all of these matches that they can make it up in. And even then, they're 5th place right now. They're 5 points behind 4th place, which is G2 Minnesota. So they have a lot of time to kind of catch up to the top of the league. But that is really the biggest point here, is like LAT, they're not just accepting to be like in the middle of the pack. They don't want to just be a mediocre team, or somebody that maybe they can make it to Championship Sunday every now and then. They very much are focused on competing for titles, and as they should be, because they have all these former MVPs and former world champions, and one of the most talented trio of players that we've seen in the CDL. So for them to be 5th place and behind G2, no matter, that's not even to slander Minnesota or anything, but that is not a team that should be separating LAT from FaZe, Optic, and Paris. So I think that is kind of where LAT is coming from with this roster change. I know people were very hesitant to kind of push Kenny to the side, and I get that to an extent, but it's not about what you did, it's about what you can do. And I just don't think at this point in his career, and maybe he can prove me wrong, but over the last 2 seasons, it's been proven that he's just not up to the level of some of his teammates, and certainly not up to the level of some of the opponents that he's been facing. LAT getting absolutely rolled by Paris, getting rolled by Toronto, not being at the level of Optic and FaZe. It's kind of a recipe for disaster, and that's kind of where they are right now, going into the Major 2 qualifiers. So I've obviously supported this decision. I don't know if Nium is the guy, as you just said. He's in a pretty horrific spot, as a CDL rookie. Granted, I don't think this is his first year, like in competitive COD. Like, some rookies that we've seen, and Simp, being a perfect example. He came into United when they were at a pretty weird point, very toxic point in their roster. But it took him some time, and that team some time, to actually start winning. Granted, they ended up winning the World Championship in the playoffs at the end of that season. I don't know if that's going to be the same for Nium. But yeah, this is a very difficult position to put him in. And like you, I do believe that if they go through these Major 2 qualifiers, they go through Major 2, and they're kind of in the same position where they're still a level below the top 3 or 4 teams, then I think they probably make another roster change, and he is that roster change. I don't think that's necessarily fair, but I just don't know what, like, this is not a team historically that has been able to stand by and allow bad performances to linger. When JCap was running the team, they were making roster changes left and right. And I don't think that was necessarily on JCap or anything, but that was an era in which they just kept moving things around, trying to find something that works. And this is an even better roster than they had previously when they were making all those roster changes. So I think that if they're in the same position or a similar position by the end of Major 2, you could see another roster change for LAT. At that point, I have no idea what that change would be. As we've talked about, there are just not a lot of ARs floating around the CDL, especially at the level of LAT. So I'm interested to see. I hope Nium does well. I never want to see a guy come into the CDL and fail and not be able to live up to expectations that either he set for himself or the fans or the team set for them. So hopefully things work out for him. But man, that is a really, really rough spot to be in for LAT going into these major qualifiers. I think we should just move on to C9 though, because this was, I don't know if we were talking about like roster changes probably inevitable for the last place team in the league. I don't know if we were certainly expecting this kind of roster change. I don't know if we've ever seen a full squad wipe in the middle of a CDL season. We've certainly seen the offseason teams just completely overhaul their roster. But after Major 1, C9 actually released all 4 players from their team. So no benching involved here. Vivid Beans, Afro, and Mac, all free agents. And I guess the reports are even more interesting. So not only did they release these players, but reportedly, and I think Jack kind of, he denied the pay cut, but there were some things that he was not, denying completely, which I thought was very interesting. But the reports were that C9 had basically demanded that they all 4 take a pay cut by half, that they make like 48,000 or whatever it is, and then that they would cut it to 24,000. And if they didn't take the pay cut, then they would be completely released. They are all released. So I think that's interesting details to keep in mind. But then Jack, the owner of C9, he did an interview with Ronnie Intel, and to his credit, Ronnie asked that question, like, first off, he just said, like, they've been, there have been rumors that he said there have been reports that you literally asked them to take a pay cut, and Jack said that he did not ask them to take a pay cut, but he also said that their performance was completely unacceptable, and that I think he tried to spin it as C9 wanted to look out for the best interests of these players, so they released them to explore their opportunities. I mean, if just a note to all future employers of myself or Bink, please don't fire us, to look out for our best interests. I will look out for my own best interest. Bink will look out for his. Like, I would like to have a paycheck no matter how small while I look for opportunities. I didn't really get that point, and I think that was complete bullshit by Jack. I think this interview made him look horrible, and I don't know if I'm the public relations manager at C9, I would be having a meeting with Jack and be like, why are you doing these interviews where you look kind of like a greedy asshole, and that you don't know what you're doing? And I should also add, it's not even like C9 in League of Legends or in the LCS where it's like, well, at least you're one of the best teams and you can get away with that, and like you're very popular. You're not a very popular team in the CDL. You're literally the worst team in the CDL, and now you look like kind of a just really poorly run organization as well. This is just like the worst look ever for C9. So where do you kind of stand on this whole saga that we've seen from Cloud9 over the last few weeks?
Yeah, I think I had a similar reaction to you in terms of the pay cut aspect of this. I thought it was weird that he basically said, I didn't ask the players to take a pay cut, but I wanted them to explore other options. And then he proceeded to basically say, I didn't ask them to take a pay cut, but I wanted them to take a pay cut or do these other things, or else we were going to move them. So it was kind of like, saying one thing, but
and then he moved them. So it's like that's the thing.
Yeah. So I had the same sort of reaction to that. I will, devil's advocate here. I will, uh, give Jack some credit in the sense of him saying that he paid the players rent for a month so they had time to do things. At the same time, 2 of the players on this team are from an entirely different country. So I feel like, maybe legally he wouldn't have been obligated to pay for their rent to stay here, but it it feels like the right thing to do at the minimum for people who potentially have to like completely move to a different country across the ocean. But I don't know, Afro and Bean situations, like they might still like be able to have their visa and compete in NA challengers and stay here now, or that sort of deal. So not entirely sure how that shakes out, but um yeah, this was really just like going back to the beginning of the offseason rumors before this season. We heard rumblings that Cloud9 were intending to have the cheapest roster in CDL history. And I remember at the time the C9 coach was like, "Don't believe everything you say." And we both said like, "Yeah, of course he's going to say that, obviously." But this sort of makes it seem like those reports were right, especially when you hear the number, the 48,000 and cutting that to 24,000. Those are all reported. I think Temp was the one saying those numbers, and people on the flank were saying that, because I don't think it was even 48,000 in the leaked salary leak document that we saw all the way back then. But that 48,000, if that was the number, that's even lower than what the minimum was beforehand. And because it was like 50 and then it went up to 55,000, I believe. And then they reportedly, or maybe they officially confirmed the removal of the minimum, and then it was reported that it had to be like within the state, like meet the state minimum salary of where the teams were located. But then for Cloud9, does that mean it's like New York's state minimum if they're paying them out of New York because that's where the business is quote unquote located? But like Cloud9's business is located in California, so would it be the California
I think it's where
state
you do
minimum?
the work, because just from my experience working at Walmart, when I was like 17 or whatever, I got paid the minimum wage of Ohio. So, and obviously they're an Arkansas company. So I think it's based on where you worked, because I was looking that up. I was like, California's minimum wage is definitely not as low
Yeah,
as they
yeah.
wanted to pay them.
I don't think New York's would either.
No,
So, but I don't even know if this team was actually competing out of California before. I have no idea.
no.
Because we know that happened last year and they had the issues online, and so I don't know what the deal was with this year and the beginning phase for Cloud9. But I think, long story short, now I do agree this definitely is not a great look for Cloud9, especially as an organization that has a long running history in esports, not just Call of Duty, and then they come in swooping into CDL and everyone's like all excited for an org like Cloud9 to be involved, and it hasn't been anything remotely close to those high expectations. Granted, a part of that does have to do, as Jack mentioned in the interview, with Cloud9 coming into a team that was a year removed from winning the world championship and had Hydra, one of the best players in the game, and then Hydra leaves before even really playing for Cloud9. Did he might have wore a Cloud9 jersey at EWC, um, but they were still the subliners, so I don't remember if he did. But regardless, he at most played one non CDL tournament for Cloud9 before leaving and going elsewhere. And I think that does play a big factor in it, because you got to think it's sort of like a, team is entering a league with an opportunity to have a franchise player, and then stuff goes the other way, and you're kind of left scrambling, trying to pick up the pieces where you can. Um, but yeah, I'm not gonna make any excuses for Cloud9. I think a lot of this is pretty ridiculous, and it has been a very lackluster showing from the organization, both on the server and outside of the server, based on what we're hearing, uh, either from Jack himself or the rumors and reports going on about what's happening within the organization. So, um, tough start to the season for them. I will, again, I guess I will sort of give them credit, because I believe I said on the last episode, based on those rumors and stuff about the financials, I wouldn't have been surprised if they didn't make roster moves to try and save money. But at the same time, I think it is important to note too that now, like, the number going around, like, let's just use that 48 cut in half to 24 number. That's not what Cloud9 will end up paying
No.
anyone they actually pick up, because that's like for a year. I mean, they could, in theory, be like a show of good faith, pay like the year, but that's like just like, it's going to be like a prorated
Yeah.
salary type thing. So 24,000 would just be $2,000 a month, and if these players that they end up picking up play the next 6 months on Cloud9, they make 12,000. So they don't even make 24,000 from Cloud9. So it's I guess this is a potential way around, you know, trying to find some hidden gems for potential building blocks of the future while not spending a ton of money, and it's a way around, you know, being somewhat financially responsible and not spending a ton, but still trying to compete. But at the end of the day, I don't know how much, the competitive results are what Cloud9 is looking for at this particular moment based on what we're hearing about the new roster, but it's a it's a bit of a situation.
Yeah. So 24,000. Let's like we're just basing it off that number that was leaked or reported as like their pay cut, which was going to cut their salary in half. 24,000 comes out to about 11.54 an hour. Granted, COD is different. Like it's not the typical job, but I think it's fair to at least say. So that's 11.54 an hour in California. The minimum wage, like the state minimum wage, is 16.90. So they're definitely not in California because it would quite literally be illegal to offer them that little money. And then Texas, which maybe they're playing out of, has a 7.25 minimum wage. So maybe they're all playing out of Texas. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think that there's really any kind of excuse for this season for C9. Last year, I totally got it because they came into the situation and that situation immediately changed with Hydra wanting to go to LAT to team up with Scrap and that all kind of working out the way that it did. This season, no excuse really for them. Like there are all these teams in the CDL. They have things that go wrong in one season, and that shouldn't bleed into the next one. Usually, especially in the CDL, where contracts are much shorter in length than in professional sports. Like in the NFL, NBA, you might sign a guy to a 4 or 5 year contract. He tears his ACL on the first day of training camp, and he's never the same again. That's very understandable how things could kind of go off the rails at that point. In the CDL, these guys are signed to 3-year contracts at most. I don't know who's even signing a 3-year contract anymore, but most of these guys are on 1-year deals. Some are on 2 or have like a team option for the second year. And C9 is like not paying very much anyway, so no respectable like CDL veteran who is like in some kind of demand is going to accept a reported $48,000 per year offer. Like a lot of these guys are just going to be like, I'm getting getting offered like at least twice that by another team. Why would I go to C9? There's really no benefit, especially because C9 maybe in other esports is like the big dog. Like they can go to the LCS and like we're one of the most popular teams. We probably are is C9 the most popular now that TSM has obviously been gone for a while?
In North America, yeah.
Yeah.
C9 and Liquid.
So like they have like the reputation, right? They have like the clout, so to speak, to kind of, they have the optic advantage where a player might actually take less money to be on one of those teams because they understand like how popular they can get and the exposure that they can get. C9 doesn't offer any of that in the CDL. They are a bottom tier organization as far as Call of Duty fans go because before this, like they were really only involved in, I think they were like, no, that was G2, but C9 was there for Black Ops 3, right? At the very beginning of the CWL. That was Havoc's team, right?
There was the Black Ops 3, they had a skin.
Yeah, and they had 2 teams, I believe, white and blue, if I'm not mistaken. So, like, they've tried, but, like, that was a long time ago. They were not particularly successful or memorable. So the
Black Ops 3 team was, at the end, that was Axe's team where
Oh, yeah.
Assault beats Formal in the 1v1 to eliminate Optic from champs.
Yeah, and then I don't think they came back for the next year, did they?
Uh,
Which would have been IW?
well, no, they were because that Aches and them they made it like second or third at the first event of IW because I was Vegas and I was there.
I don't
So
remember this at all. I
yeah,
completely
no,
blocked out IW.
yeah, they were involved at the start there, and no, they would have been at the end too, because that was when Priestahh and Exotic would have joined Jesus, Aches on uh Cloud9 for champs, and they got like top
I have
16.
like literally some amnesia around that entire part. I don't remember C9 ever being past that BO3 champs, but either way, like they don't have the reputation that they do in other esports. So they are not, I mean, they might be lower than G2 Minnesota because the Rocker had like a fairly good reputation. They were able to attract free agents like attached to their team. Like they're definitely not on par with NYSL, which has been a conversation in light of all of this, is that NYSL did quite a bit to kind of become something in the CDL and to become a brand. They were very, aggressive with their branding and their marketing early on before, I think before COVID really kind of killed everything because they were going around New York and everything. But either way, like they just don't have it. And now I want to kind of shift this into the conversation about their new roster. According to some reports, it's Nate, Icons, Encourage, or is this not right? Oh no, Hyde, Nedra, Okies, and Encourage. So the only guy I know out of that is Encourage. Not saying anything about them. That's just me. Encourage also retired last year, and so I'm glad that he's back. And then I saw that I don't know if you saw that Ben J said that he had been talking to Encourage and trying to advise him on his contract offer from C9, and apparently he said that it was so low that like fast food restaurants and grocery stores could offer him more to do to work. So I would say that they are C9 is saving money on this because 48,000, like even if you're prorating it or whatever, but like $48,000 a year salary, they are not offering that anymore. It seems it appears that they're offering like $30,000 a year. So they've basically cut it by 1.5. I think that's notable. This isn't like you're not tanking for a draft pick. Like, are they really saving money to go after Hydra or Scrap? Like, there are a lot of potential free agents coming up in 2026, but I don't know. Are you going to save like whatever it is, $50,000 and be able to put that toward the Hydra fund in free agency? I just don't see that as a realistic possibility. So what do you think is going on with C9, and what do you think about them replacing this veteran-laden roster that we both did not really have high hopes for with a completely, really relatively unknown challengers team?
Yeah, so I think that the second part of the Jack interview with Ronnie Intel shed some light on some of the business aspects of it. I like you mentioned early on, Ronnie did a pretty good job of asking some pretty straightforward questions, and Jack actually like kind of answered most of them. And Jack said like he's committed to COD Esports and not looking to sell, even though he has turned down inquiries from other organizations from Jack. Um, and then he mentioned MTX sales and prize earnings. So like the MTX is microtransactions, I'm assuming, but I had
Yeah.
never seen that acronym before for it. So that a little interesting to me there. But it says players and coaches will earn 100% for that's the quote is just players and coaches will earn 100%, and previously mentions the MTX sales and prize earnings. So um like trying to use that sort of business approach is interesting, but at least it's like something that he's saying they're looking towards. I don't know how that helps Cloud9 as an organization, and unless it's just, like a popularity thing, kind of like you were alluding to. But if 100% of those profits are going to the players and coaches, then Cloud9 is not getting anything out of it except exposure. Um, but long-winded, a little bit of a rant here in terms of the new roster stuff. I can understand the position of some of these guys, kind of like I mean, it started firstly. They reportedly attempted to get several different players, including QK from Falcons, which was kind of funny to me because we mentioned
Yeah.
last episode how Falcons players probably wouldn't be a target for this roster mania because of you know visa situations and all that potentially being some hurdles to overcome for some of these CDL teams, but seemingly Cloud9 was making him a top priority. He allegedly, reportedly turned down an offer, along with Renegade and Kips from the Huntsman Optics Academy team. Spart apparently never got like a formal offer from Cloud9, but talked to some of the other guys, and then just decided to stick with the Bush for now. And I think Awakening was even mentioned as potential option early on for Cloud9, and that didn't end up happening. But now it's reportedly Okus, Encourage, Hyde, and Nezra, and the first three, Okus, Encourage, and Hyde, were all Stallions guys. I don't know anything about Nezra at all, but yeah, I think to me as well, Encourage was the name that jumped out the most because, like you mentioned, he was kind of you know, one of those guys who people had an eye on early last year. Then he retires and then he comes back and was playing again end of last year, I believe, as well as earlier this year. And I think part of his like retirement thing was like kind of like frustration that he hadn't gotten a CDL opportunity, even though he's like was so fresh to the amateur scene and everything like that. And not to put words in his mouth or anything, I'm pretty sure you could go back and find the tweet if he didn't delete it. But keeping that in mind with this situation, it might not be about the money for him and some of these other options for Cloud9. It's the opportunity to play Call of Duty at the highest level. And that for some people, and if you are able to deal with the uh repercussions or whatever the best word is that I'm not able to think of here, if you're able to deal with a lack of financial security from a CDL offer, but you still get the benefit of playing professional Call of Duty, that's an opportunity that some people won't pass up. And end of the day, these guys are all adults and able to make their own decisions, and that's why it's most likely the case where we're not looking at guys who are in their 30s with a family and wife and kids and all that. We're looking at young guys who
Hmm.
have or are looking at the opportunity to play pro cod versus the immediate boon of just getting a giga bag in salary. Like the salary might not be the main motivation here. Long-winded way of saying that. So I'm happy for all these guys for especially with uh, the reports around players turning down the opportunities. These guys are like, yeah, well, throw me into the fire, see what happens. And it's going to be a tough road because this is a very young team with, not really any veteran leadership. And even from a coaching standpoint, I don't think maybe I'm not even sure if there's a true veteran like assistant coach or anything like that on staff. It's going to be interesting, and I think if I was in these player situation and accepted this offer for Cloud9, I am trying to go out there and do everything to the best of my ability and not worry about the team or um the like the group aspect of it. And obviously that might sound selfish, but when the expectations on this team and everything are so low, this is an opportunity where if they just enter the CDL and get absolutely giga slammed, they might not get another opportunity. But if you
Mm-hmm.
go out there and do your thing on an individual basis, this could leapfrog you into other CDL opportunities, make more money, make this more of a long-term deal in the CDL. So it's definitely a bit of a double-edged sword in that regard, because obviously you don't, like, I would never advise someone to like not play for the team or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that in a team sport. But this might be one of those situations where it's like, okay, you got to look at where Cloud9 is at with things right now, especially with the reported numbers on the salary and everything, and be like, yeah, I'm gonna do me. I'm gonna try to do my best and put on a show and showcase my talents and hopefully take things to the next step from there.
I think the last part of what you said is pretty applicable, and we've seen it before with like the Boston Breach and the Paris Legion, like teams that are really bad that don't offer a lot of money reportedly. I think about like when Major Maniac came into Boston, like toward the end of their really really bad season.
Yeah.
Like we both said, like should Major Maniac be doing that? Like because he's not gonna get. Obviously, we get a lot of credit if they did well, but we were like, they're not going to do well. They're going to be bad still. And does that kind of hurt your reputation or your chances at getting another CDL chance maybe the following season? I don't remember. I don't know if Maniac ever got back into the CDL. I don't think that was necessarily like super, like connected or whatever, but I think it's worth pointing out. And then the Paris Legion obviously was like, we were like, these guys, like they're in the worst possible situation. They don't get paid very much. They don't have a lot of organizational support, if any. They're on a really bad team. They're going to look bad because they're on a really bad team. And that just kind of snowballs. And I think that's why you're seeing these other players reportedly turn down offers to be on a CDL team, which is pretty crazy to think about just in general. That like challengers players that like don't have the security already financially, they don't have that, and yet they're still like, no, like we don't want to do that. We don't want to go to C9. We don't want to play for the worst team in the league. I think that's really interesting and that really damning for C9. And I hope that Jack and whoever's running the CDL operation feels like maybe we should change our strategy with this whole thing, because we're getting turned down by players that have never been in the CDL and may never get to the CDL ultimately. And that is just a wild thing to think about. And I did want to just point to the Zuma and Ben thing, because I mentioned that Ben was apparently helping encourage, try to make this decision and looking over his contract, which is very important. I hope that more challengers players or more CDL players have someone like Ben, hopefully a professional, like a lawyer, a contract lawyer, to look over their contracts before they sign them, because that's obviously, you don't want to get taken advantage of by, I would say, increasingly scummier teams that are coming into the CDL, because there is no minimum salary. There seems to be a lot less oversight around the contracts and whatever deals are being made in the CDL. But I think it's important that people have that. But I thought it was interesting that Ben said he disagreed with Zuma, and Ben said that he did not want Encourage to take the offer, but Zuma did. And I think that really shows the difference between a player's mentality and a non-player's mentality. And this is no shot at Ben or anything, but for Ben, he's looking at it from like a business perspective, and he's looking at it from someone like an employee. He's looking at it like an employee-employer contract, which it is. And Zuma is looking at it as an opportunity. He's looking at it as like, you may never get this chance again, and you have to take it. And I would have taken it if I were in a similar position. And I just think that's very interesting. And I don't think that either one of them is wrong, because maybe these guys are taking a huge risk, and maybe it's going to backfire on them like really horribly, and it's not going to be their fault because they're coming into a team that is already completely dysfunctional. They're we don't know how well it's going to translate from challengers to the CDL. There have been very mixed results with that in the past, and you're not getting paid a ton, which some of these guys, maybe they can afford to do that. Like you said, like if you are young and you have parent support or whatever, maybe a girlfriend or whatever that can help you make up the difference that you're giving up. But they're also in challengers, so like what do they have in the first place? Like what are they getting other than the winnings? Like that's really all they can get. But I don't know. I just think it's an interesting situation that has been kind of surrounding C9. But last thing I'll say is like Jack to say, well, they get their prize winnings, dude. They're not getting a ton of prize winnings. Like, like they might not even get to Major 2. Like,
Yeah.
So, and I have no idea how much is made on those microtransactions. None of us do, because when that report came out, was it from Snowball or Breaking Point or whatever? The figures for microtransactions, all the people were like, well, that's completely wrong. Those are inaccurate. So we have no idea how much teams are actually making on it. If it is like hundreds of thousands of dollars, I highly doubt C9 is giving hundreds of $1,000s to players. Like, there's just no way. Like, there's absolutely no way that in any organization, but especially one that is paying their players reportedly, between $25,000 or $35,000 a year, there's no way that they'd be giving up voluntarily hundreds of thousands of dollars to these players to make up for the salary that they're not giving them. So it has to be relatively kind of small in the grand scheme of things. But I think those are things that the players need to figure out on their own, or to figure out before they sign those deals, because it would really suck to be like, well, I'm at least going to get my prize earnings, I'm going to get my microtransaction money, and then it turns out to be like $1,000 extra. Like that would not be worth it in the end, at least financially. So I think it's really messed up. Players should unionize. It's been a thing for a long time, but like when they cut the minimum, like we used to have a minimum salary of $55,000 per year, which that $48,000 is less than that, and $24,000 is certainly less than that. So, I don't. I just think like players have to take care of themselves and look out for each other, and they're kind of getting railroaded, and some of these players are getting railroaded, and some of these players are living the high life, reportedly making $1 million, $2 million a year. So I just think it's a really messed up situation altogether. Where do you want to go from here? Should we just finish up the roster mania section before? So Toronto, they are sticking with their roster. But I thought it was very interesting that they actually said that they are role swapping. We never hear that, but apparently, or not apparently, Toronto came out and said, hey, this foursome is staying, but we're switching Kleenex and Real's roles. So Real is moving to flex. Kleenex, who we talked about quite a bit, I think he worked out on flex at EWC last year, if I'm not mistaken, when they had Abe on the roster. And then during the offseason, they stuck with him as the flex. He will be moving from flex to SMG now. Obviously, you're a big Tissue fan. This has been a pretty pretty up and down roster, but specifically very down recently. So what do you think of this move?
Yeah, I thought I had the immediate same reaction to you, in the sense of I can almost feel like I can count on my hand how few times a team has come out and announced a role change. It's usually something that a player will individually tweet, or we'll just hear about it on the flank or a stream from somebody, whatever the case may be. So I thought that was interesting, and I think for the most part, just based on the way things have gone for Toronto lately, this is more about Real's struggles at the start of this year, more or less than Kleenex and his ability to be a flex. I think Kleenex was pretty all right in terms of what I saw from him as a flex. But Real really struggled at Major 1 in particular, and struggled in some of the matches towards the end of the qualifiers. So it will be interesting to see how he handles that transition, because it's not really something we've had to consider from Real in his CDL journey. He's just been that superstar SMG slayer, and maybe this is something that'll work out for for Toronto in the long run. There are rumblings that potentially Kips from Huntsman is being considered for a substitute spot on this team. So that is something we have noted of Toronto previously. They've done a good job of having some subs, even going back to that illustrious 10-man roster at the start of
Hmm.
the CDL. Um, them and Miami are two teams that come to mind of like identifying talent, having them as a sub, and then being able to quickly insert them. I mean, Insight himself was that same situation when he came in to replace Methods in Cold War, and then Toronto ended up being one of the better teams that year, and actually a team that contended for 4 titles with Atlanta Thieves for a little bit. And then obviously Scrap was a sub for Toronto. Hicksy came in and made an impact. So they've done that before, and it could be a situation that the substitute thing hasn't been confirmed yet, but maybe that's like the little kick in the behind that some of these Toronto guys need. Like, okay, oh shit, they got somebody waiting in the wings if I don't pick it up. Like, I gotta kick it into high gear now, or my spot might be on the line. So, interesting development there for Toronto, but yeah, definitely excited to see what Real can do as a flex. And obviously, as you mentioned, the tissue is always going to be an issue with the SMG. So I'm excited to see him with a full-time SMG back in his hands.
And a related, not role change, but just a role like piece of news is KiSMET said that he still doesn't feel comfortable on the AR. He said that he hasn't gotten the flow with it, and I think that's pretty interesting just because Falcons had a lot of success toward the end of the qualifiers. They won 5 straight. They tied for first. And then they went to the major. They lost to Optic and FaZe. Against FaZe, they went to game 5 and lost in game 5. They beat C9. That was their only win on land, which is obviously nothing. But yeah, I don't know. Like, obviously, they're going to let him rock with it for the foreseeable future. Who knows, though? Long term for him because it seems like XNID is there to stay, and
Yep.
he hasn't played poorly
Nope.
recently or anything. And obviously, I had no idea why Pred or Celium would get dropped. So like he's been the very obvious odd man out for a bit now if they do make a change. And again, ARs are not very common. We've seen that with Toronto, where if they could replace Insight with like a noticeable upgrade, they probably would, but there aren't very many out there. We just saw it with Kenny and Nium. Like LAT, a championship level roster, is turning to a rookie to try to save them, and that kind of shows that the Falcons are probably in a similar situation, even though obviously Kenny had been performing like worse and much more inconsistently than KiSMET has with the Falcons, and he's also just like not a natural AR. So like there's a lot going on. What did you think of his comments though?
Yeah, that's the main reason I included that is because I know you've mentioned your thoughts on Kismet and stuff so far, and I've mentioned as well how it felt like he's playing out of role because we always know about him being like that frontline SMG setting the pace for Hydra. In theory, I was envisioning him being that frontline SMG setting the pace for Pred, and that just hasn't been what happened yet. So it's completely not a shock to me to hear him say he hasn't caught flow with the AR yet. But I really included that just simply to highlight that, and I think it's something to keep an eye on, especially because it doesn't seem like Falcons are making a change now, but they have seemingly or reportedly, I don't know if it's official or not, they've been making some moves on the Falcons Academy front with their 2 rosters. Um, so they have some people waiting in the wings, most notably QK, who is one of the players who was a option for Cloud9. Is that a situation here where if QK continues to play pretty well in challengers, they end up moving on from KiSMET and promoting him to the main roster? I could see that happening if things don't improve, but I also um I still think very highly of the Bulldog. This might just be an unfortunate situation for him in terms of fitting role wise. But I'm hopeful that he's able to get more acclimated to the AR and be a contributing piece for this Falcons team because I still believe in him as a player.
Yeah, I definitely believe in him too. Like, it was unfortunate what happened with LAG last year and just
Yeah.
how bad they were as a team. And I'm glad that it didn't catch up with him, and like, he was caught up in whatever that was and not able to get an opportunity this season. It's just also unfortunate that he didn't get to be on a team that actually has a place for him, that like he can do his thing, that he could play in role. Which, that happens. There's only 12 teams, so there are very limited opportunities and all that. But um, and again, they're not in that bad of a position. I think they're in sixth in the CDL at this point, and I think that was about where we had them to start the season, because they are not at the level of like FaZe and Optic and Paris and all that. And we thought LAT, but they're like right behind LAT. So I think there's a lot that can be improved upon for Riyadh, and I hope that they do it. I hope that the Bulldog is able to stick, and he's able to kind of catch the flow and become an AR player, which I think has like a pretty good career path. There are very few of them, so it's in high demand if you're really good, and we've seen that many times over the years. I think that about does it for the roster mania stuff. We do have some other stuff before we get into the matches this week. I think the biggest thing happened like last night or yesterday. So it's a good thing that we didn't do this show on Tuesday, because I would have lost my mind. So we learned that there will be no new maps coming into the rotation. Apparently, I don't even know really what happened there. Like, but we had thought maybe Meltdown coming in. We thought Fringe maybe coming in, or just some new flavors to the map pool, and that doesn't seem to be happening for the Major 2 qualifiers. Maybe we'll see it before Major 3 qualifiers. That just seems like a long time ago, time away from now, though. But the bigger news was revolving around the snipers. Again, snipers have been a point of discussion for several months now. A while ago, there were discussions to completely GA the sniper rifles because they were believed to be too OP. So, and then there was an agreement that the CDL players came to, where there would be what is it, 2 lives. So if you basically don't die with your sniper, you can keep it the entire match in S&D. But if you die twice with the sniper, then you can't use the sniper a third time. And apparently that wasn't good enough. Optic apparently pushed for the vote to completely GA snipers. They were officially GA'd as of 7:30 p.m. As of 11 p.m., they were un-GA'd because Twitter has a power that no other social media platform has, and they basically said, "The hell with you guys! You guys suck. You're lame." And the players were like, "Please don't call us lame. We'll un-GA the snipers." I thought it was interesting that Spinna Spence went on Twitter and he said that we had no like role in this at all, and like GAing them or whatever. Basically saying like, point to the players, not the league. I think that's interesting, and that's what he should do. He should put the blame on the players who have really become like the biggest, whiniest babies when it comes to things that they don't like in the game. Because apparently smokes were also a part of this GA as well as the snipers. So just give me your thoughts on what was going on with this. How much are you blaming Optic, I guess, and Dashy, because he went on whatever their podcast was and he complained about the snipers, and Octane, I saw, was like, that is the biggest bullshit answer I've ever heard. So just give me your thoughts on all that.
Yeah, I'm gonna go through the timeline basically the same way you did. Starting off with the map testing being chalked, I'm completely, utterly gutted that we aren't getting any new maps, and I have to go on a little bit of a mini rant here. Try to keep it contained, but specifically thinking of Fringe and how upset. I personally was, but I feel like a good number of people in the community. I could be wrong on the community aspect of this, but I feel like it was enough of a vocal point last year that people were disheartened in the sense that Fringe was added so late to the game last year that it was unable to be used in competitive Call of Duty. Then we get this golden opportunity this year where it's added in the earliest seasonal update possible, and it's still seemingly not going to be added to competitive when it's possibly one of the best maps in competitive Call of Duty history that has yet to be remade or reused on a competitive level. Um, Especially in this game, we noted it last time we talked about Fringe, whatever episode that is, with the advanced movement in Black Ops 7 and the wall jump in the tunnel train tracks area on Fringe. It feels like this as a scenario where it could have worked out very well, but obviously something is going on to prevent that from happening. I still am gonna hold out hope that I mean, I would just be flabbergasted if there were no map changes this year at all. So I guess it's possible that we could see some after the Major 2 cycle. But I was really hoping to just see at least one new map, and I was really hoping Meltdown S&D would get in. Um, and I thought Fringe would be a slam dunk. I think Colossus, Hardpoint in particular, was a map that could have been pretty easily removed, especially on multiple occasions so far this year. On that one hard point in like the back corner of the map, there have been very questionable spawns that have cost several teams maps at different points, whether it was in the qualifiers or at Major 1 itself. I thought that could have been enough to provoke a map change and get another hardpoint map in at the least, but seemingly that's not the case. So I really am disheartened by that development in this sense. Hopefully, potentially, maybe some of the spawns were updated on Colossus in particular. I already saw some things when ranked play was released that like some of the spawns and the points in overload have changed, and that's a bit of a mess. So hopefully some changes happen for the better in that regard, and as well as like spawns on hardpoint and whatnot. But I am pretty disappointed in the map pool development that we heard. And then we go right into snipers being GA'd after that. And I'm just sitting here staring at this stuff on Twitter, and I'm just like, this is brutal. What the hell is
Yeah.
going on? And I will, regardless of the, who started or whatnot, I did see another clip. I thought it was in reply to the one that I put in the notes here mentioning Dashy, but I didn't see it this time. There was somebody who tweeted it that said like it was the notion of potentially evaluating the sniper GA was brought up after Sib had like the sick two-piece snipe where he got like a hard scope snipe, and then it was on Scar. He ran into like that shop by mid map and got a sick quick scope mid map on someone on Optic. Um, and that was what had been, sort of stirring the pot a little bit. And to have one, like, don't get me wrong, that was pretty ridiculous kill, and the fact Sib was able to land that shot in the fashion in which he did is definitely, one of those eyebrow raisers. But to have like one instance like that be something that could be like a catalyst to potentially remove the weapon completely is pretty crazy in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in the end, just a couple hours later, seemingly this whole thing has been resolved now because they have found some setting that can be toggled in the CDL build to turn off aim assist on snipers. And I just saw something for ranked play too, from that Maddox guy. I forget like the Matttek or
Oh
EX,
yeah.
whatever, the Treyarch dev, saying something that they're going to implement um, that setting in ranked play as well for snipers. So that seems to be what's going forward. And it seems like now, if that setting is involved, it's potentially going to be no two life limit at all. And snipers will be able to be used as much as you want. It's just going to be harder to hit some of those more ridiculous shots that we've seen at moments this year. So, pretty big whirlwind, and in the sniper GA drama saga yesterday in just a few short hours. But in the long run, if this setting is enacted and we're able to see snipers with no life limit and snipers are still a functioning part of search and destroy this year, I guess I'm not going to complain. It was definitely a very frustrating couple of hours yesterday, and I was very, very ready to go on a much longer rant about all of this. Um, but for now, I do think, it is worth mentioning too. You mentioned the smokes potentially being GA'd along with the snipers earlier in the day. I told you, um, my reaction to that was I think that was just like, smokes are to be used as a countermeasure to the snipers since there's no attachments allowed, no thermal scope like back in the day. So if snipers are in, I'm assuming smokes will stay and won't be G8 as well. But this will just be something we have to keep an eye out for when the matches kick back up in a couple days.
My thing with the aim assist toggle is like, did no one alert the players to this like at any point before February 10th?
They apparently just discovered it yesterday when all this was happening.
So what the fuck are they putting it in the game for if it's in the CDL build and they didn't tell the CDL players like, hey, or they didn't tell the CDL apparently. I don't know. Like somebody did not get the memo that like, hey, this thing is in the game, by the way. Like, I don't know if you want to use it or not, but just letting you know, like, you could do this. That is so stupid. And like, I'm cool with it. Like, obviously I want the snipers in the game. Like whatever the sacrifice there has to be to make sure that snipers can be used in competitive, I'm all for. But it shouldn't have taken until February 10th, until after the Major 1 qualifiers, after Major 1, like on the like 3 or 4 days before Major 2 qualifiers begin. Then we're having this massive uproar about sniper rifles, and then somebody was like, hey, like there's a toggle in the settings, right? Like, that's so stupid. That feels very COD esports. That feels like somebody just didn't bother to say it, and we almost didn't have snipers because of this. I mean, other than like, it's really annoying. I'm glad that we got to the place that we got to, and that we didn't have to have these qualifiers without snipers and smokes. But it's the maps thing is still. I don't know who to blame for that. I don't know whether my frustration should be directed toward the players. Should it be directed toward the league itself? That hasn't been made clear to me. When it's made clear, I will be directing my fury toward them, because I think that's really stupid. I think that COD can get so monotonous over a 6-month season that we need different maps. There needs to be diversity within guns. We haven't gotten that yet, right? Because we have like the same meta that we had before, and like, so we have the same gun meta, we have the same map meta. What is changing in the CDL? Like, is it just if you were good in the beginning, you kind of just scale upward and there's no changes during the season? That's unlike any other esport in existence, right? Like League of Legends, champions get banned. Like, it happens, and you have to get used to it. Counter-Strike, maps get banned. You have to get used to it. In the CDL, we've just been like, it's whatever. Whatever happened on November 18th, that's kind of the build we're working with until June 18th. And I think that, in a way, limits how interesting the CDL can be. And I think this is a pretty good, a good situation to look at and realize that. But I'm glad that we got where we got, and that the snipers are not GA'd. I just wish there were more maps. I wish we had better maps. I wish the pros would stop GAing things, because I'm at the point where it's like, I'm done with you guys. I don't think that you should have the power that you should. I think the CDL, and I've said this before, I think the CDL should just like puff out their chest and be like, yeah, like we don't have to listen to you. Like, you might not want to play the map. You're still going to have to play the map, because we're going to ban the map that you want to play, and you're going to be forced to do something else. Or we're going to do that with guns. I've said it before, like that's really the only way you can force the players to change is to literally force them to change. And I think the CDL should do that. I don't think the CDL should take a back seat to basically what they've done is that they have been almost emasculated by like the likes of Slasher and Octane and the players like in the last 5 years that just complain about everything. And like, right, I don't think that they had like, some of them were rightful complaints and worries about like the competitive integrity of Call of Duty, but it also was like they got into almost a complex that like we can't change things without the approval of X, Y, and Z, and that's obviously not the case. Like you're a multi-billion-dollar organization with like you have as much money and as much power as you want to wield, and for you to kind of like cower down to a group of like 48 CDL players, most of whom have no idea what's going on a given day. Like I think that's kind of ridiculous, and the CDL should take the power back when it comes to GAs and make sure that they can't really exist in the way that they do right now. Rant over. We should move on. I think that's the biggest thing. I will say though that the revelation that BrianSaintt was also running the social media accounts for the Carolina Royal Ravens on top of being the head coach and the general manager of the Carolina Royal Ravens was quite intriguing. He just put that out there. I think that might have been like, this fucking sucks. Like there's no way that a guy should be doing all that. Granted, Clayster, when he was being courted by then the Vegas Legion, I believe, he was offered a basically behind the scenes role on top of being a player on the CDL team.
I remember that, yeah.
For like a $45,000 salary. I think that was also pretty interesting. What do you think you should be able to run the Carolina Royal Ravens now? Like, should you apply for social media manager for the Royal Ravens?
Well, I don't know what they're going to be doing now. I don't think it said anything in there about what they're doing. It's not like the Royal Ravens social accounts have been super active over the last couple of years.
Now I know
had
why.
one guy who was doing a good job. He was like Peterman or something like that.
Yeah, I know you're talking about. Don't know how to say his name.
He did a pretty good job for a while, yeah. But this was I think the way I looked at this and interpreted it as, Carolina got off to a hot start after bringing Exceed in. Then they just absolutely flounder at Major 1, and BrianSaintt's like, yeah, I'm just going to throw this out there because I'm going to get all this blame, and I'm just going to be like, yeah, I've been doing all this shit, and, it is what it is. So definitely not exactly the most surprising development, just given what we've heard about the Carolina franchise and organization over recent years, but definitely a lot on one guy's plate. And I guess at the very least, shout out BrianSaintt for making it work at the end of those qualifiers, especially given the fact like GM and coach alone, like he had to make the roster move to bring Exceed in and then coach the team after that and then get them up to speed to go on that 5-0 little stretch. Bigger thing now moving forward for Carolina is how they can, get back to that early honeymoon phase or what they can do to replicate those early results and not have it be considered a honeymoon phase. That's just like, a flash in the pan or whatever.
I mean, it's interesting too because Saint just put it out there, I think, before the season that they were not playing together. Like they weren't in the same area. Yeah. Like he was in Minnesota, and then there are players like in Texas, California, wherever. So they were like all over the map. Which makes them one of the only teams not to have like a setup like for themselves. I mean, they are the new Paris Legion. Like they are. Maybe C9 is competing for that title too. Like I don't know. Like maybe they should just have like a fist fight to decide who's like definitively the worst organization in the CDL. And the Boston Breach have been like dying for like 3 years now and somehow like aren't that bad apparently. I just don't know. Like it's really sad. And I thought, was this like not one of the things that the CDL was apparently supposed to fix? Was like, we're going to make sure that the organizations that get involved directly with Activision and Call of Duty Elite in Call of Duty esports will be like upstanding and have the financial resources to run a competent CDL organization. Was that not like a selling point as part of the franchise model? And yet we have an organization that pays you less than McDonald's pays you to flip some fries, and you have an organization that has one of the most important people to the day-to-day operations of the organization basically be the only person involved in the day-to-day operations of the organization. Like he's the head coach, he's the GM, and he's the social media manager. Like, I mean, I might have done that when I was like, I don't know, 16 and I was messing around with my friends, but I wasn't in a 12-team franchise league run by a multi-billion-dollar company. I like, is this not like, not exactly, because obviously I'm hoping they get paid. I mean, there have been allegations against the parent company of the Royal Ravens before that they didn't get paid what they were supposed to. But like, is this not like a denial esports, midnight esports kind of deal where Saints is doing his own graphics for when it gets picked up by midnight? Like, is it not that? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. How does the CDL allow this? Because the checks don't bounce, like they're cool with it? Like that makes no sense.
I don't think the CDL cares.
Then
it's on the
then give it back.
Themselves.
Give it back to us. Like, give it back to the community. Stop running it. If you can't weed out these organizations, and I'm not saying like they were at one point, I don't believe they are now, but they were one point run by Rect Global, which owned Rogue. Obviously NYSL had, what was NYXL? Was that their Overwatch League team, or what was their? I don't know if they had like a parent company or if it was NYXL, but they were like
Inbox, I believe.
Yeah, but they had investors like Kevin Durant, and they were like obviously touting a lot of investment in the like 2019, 2020 range, and yet like we're stuck with organizations that just don't have any kind of interest in investing in the CDL now. That's why I was advocating for the Paris Legion to get absolutely booted out of this universe, because they put in no effort in terms of social media. They put it like they were having volunteers. I remember that Paris, or maybe it was Vegas Legion at that point, but like they had like an unpaid volunteer who was doing work for the social media platforms for the Paris Legion. And it's just like, what is going on? Like we have Optic, we have LIT, we have like, God bless the Minnesota Rocker for trying as much as they did. I think, NYSL tried as much as they did. The Toronto is like literally the best case scenario of like I can't even say non-endemic, because they owned Splice and Mad Lions and Koi Esports and all that. But like Toronto didn't really have like a big connection to COD, or as much as we thought. And yet they like continually host events. They put out social media. Like they're actually, like we just talked about, they actually said they had a role swap. Some teams don't even announce that they have a roster swap, and they're talking about roles on Twitter. So like, to me, it's ridiculous that there's such a chasm between the teams that actually give a shit and the Carolina Royal Ravens and the Cloud9 New Yorks of this world. And we need to get these organizations out of the CDL. They are a blight on what we want out of COD esports. Like, just give those two spots to Omit, and give it to Bush, or give it to War, give it to the challengers teams that have been pouring in all that money for basically nothing. Like, they get no kind of promotion or no kind of benefit out of this, and they continue to do it year over year. We need more organizations like that, and less like C9 and Carolina. And I will end my rant there. I hope that they absolutely get kicked out of the league over the next year, like this offseason. I don't want to see them in the league again. And I hope that those three organizations that I just mentioned, Omit, Bush, and War, get the bump up that they deserve. I will say Bush less so than War and Omit, just because Omit and War have put so many years into this when they didn't need to. But Bush have done like an incredible job at promoting challengers this season in particular. So like, please, 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 CDL, if anyone in the CDL is listening, maybe that, the three guys that work for the CDL, apparently, maybe just like give a shit one time and kick these teams out that they're not paying you money to be in the league, right? Like there's no, like maybe there's a contract somewhere that has dust all over it, but like break the contract and get them out of the CDL. That it can't be done anymore. I don't know if you have anything to say before I move on.
I was just gonna say there was a tweet I saw. I didn't put it in the notes, but Zuma was saying. I think Zuma was talking to Sib about the Stallions potentially. Like,
That
if
works
they
too.
get enough investors, they could potentially get a CDL spot if a spot opens up. Like there are teams waiting in the wings, and I think you did a pretty good job of comparing to Denial and Midnight, and in terms of the exact specifics of all those situations, comparing it to Carolina, I'll give Carolina the benefit of the doubt and say they haven't reached those ultimate lows as some of those other teams that weren't paying players. Like, and we were even talking about the pay cuts and what with Cloud9 just like an hour ago. Like it's things are a little better Carolina there, just maybe not from a like infrastructure standpoint and the staff around the rosters and whatnot. But yeah, at the end of the day, we talked about it a lot with the Paris Legion franchise and organizations. Like, if teams are doing the bare minimum to try and have a CDL team, especially all these years now removed, where it's not like these teams spent millions and millions of dollars to get a CDL spot. They reportedly had to at first, then those payments were paused, and then CDL and Activision, Microsoft, whatever, just wiped those payments out. So they never really had to happen.
Yep.
The only thing we never got clarity on is the teams that had to pay one of the 12 founding teams to enter the CDL. Like someone like 100 Thieves had to uh, reportedly buy their CDL spot from like Immortals when it was OGLA. Yeah. We never got clarity on how those payments were handled or if those were wiped out as well. But that's like the biggest question mark now is like what incentive is there for someone like Stallions, Bush, Omit, etc. to pay any money to a team like Carolina who after all these years seemingly didn't have to pay any money to get the spot in the first place. Like even if it's $1, let's just say you're Carolina, you had to pay $1 overall to get this CDL spot, and I'm one of these other challengers teams. That $1 is wiped out. Why would I give you any money to get the spot that you didn't end up having to pay? I guess the answer in that situation is because of the exclusivity of the CDL. You want to be in it. You gotta get my spot and supply demand, all that stuff. But it seems like a very weird situation now that we don't have all the answers to. But I think, long story short, it can go back to expansion if the CDL just adds some more spots. Some of these other challengers teams would seemingly have a free opportunity to have their own team and operate a team in the CDL. But outside of that happening, because that's been a topic we've discussed and have seemingly never gotten anywhere with over all these years, it might be time to have a hard conversation with some of these other teams and evaluate their future and what their real objective is here with the CDL and competitive COD.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue just on the future and all of that. We talked about Priestahh just real quickly. He announced that he is stepping away from competitive COD. Of course, he was with both the Falcons and the Gorillas mate last year. Former world champion with the New York Subliners. Believe he won a few majors or whatever the home series with Atlanta FaZe. He was part of that inaugural CDL roster for FaZe. Of course, just one of the best players in the league or in the CWL, CDL for a period. He said the past 10 years, 10 plus years have been some of, if not the best years of my life. I've met some of the most amazing and talented people throughout my career in competitive Call of Duty. This wasn't an easy decision, especially because it's been such a huge part of my life for the past decade. But as I've gotten older and times have changed, I started to drift away from the fun aspect of the game that I had. I really wanted to go out with a bang and not really in the way that I did. But everything happens for a reason. I hopped back into challengers to see if I would find that spark and drive again to get back where I felt I belonged. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for me, and I started to feel mentally drained from it all. For me, it's time to move forward and pursue more of my dreams. I have outside of competing. I want to thank my wife, my family, my friends, my teammates, my coaches, and everyone who supported me throughout this journey. Call of Duty will always be a part of me, and I'm grateful that I was able to live out my dream of being a Call of Duty pro. On to the next chapter. Love. So obviously wishing Priestahh, a fellow Preston, I always like to think of it. I wish him the absolute best. I've talked to him, I think, once or twice before. Always seemed like a really good guy. Great player. Like, I think he'll be overlooked by a lot of people because he wasn't the flashiest player. He didn't have he's not Simp, Beezy, all that, even though he played with those guys. And I think that's part of it. But also former world champion. So does that even matter at the end of the day? So I wish him all the best. Your overall thoughts on Priestahh and him stepping away?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to consider Priestahh being at that point of retirement. Like, we just lost Slasher a month ago, and now Priestahh is seemingly starting that next step of veterans who's stepping away from Call of Duty. Obviously Slasher was more of a veteran than Priestahh by a couple years, but it's still pretty crazy to think about. Priestahh has been around long enough to be at the point of retirement. But definitely wishing him all the best. I think that the one thing for me, obviously you mentioned the World Championship for him, but in totality throughout his career, the one thing that always stood out to me, we saw it a little bit last year with the LAG situation, but we saw it the most, and what I will never forget during the Black Ops 4 season was just his versatility. And
Mm-hmm.
seemingly now more than ever in Call of Duty, players have to do it all with multiple guns. You can't just be a sole SMG or a sole AR unless you're literally the best or close to the best at that. You have to be adaptable, as all Call of Duty players have to do from a game by game basis every year, but also being able to do it all with multiple weapons. And really, when I think about players who did that, Classic is one of the first names that come to mind, but Priestahh has got to be one of those other options at the top of the list in more recent years, certainly. But the Black Ops 4 year is what I remember the most, because he was a part of the FaZe Clan team that didn't qualify for the CWL, um, the CWL league or
Oh
whatever
yeah.
it was. They didn't make it through that process, and then he gets on 100 Thieves, but throughout that FaZe Clan segment, it was that same whatever that qualification tournament was. He ran 3 roles. He went from, I'm gonna mess up the order of it here, but he went from a grapple SOG player to a main AR on the ICR to a Maddox player. He did it all for that FaZe team in a very short period of time, then goes to 100 Thieves and finds a much better fit, and pretty seemingly was able to do things. I'm pretty sure he was the main grapple SOG on LAT, or it wasn't LAT, it was just 100T at that time. But um, without getting too into it, I just remember that start of the Black Ops 4 season, him seemingly having to change his role to try and help the team improve, and it didn't work out on that individual team, but throughout his career, and like I said, as early as last year, we saw him being willing to be flexible in his role and play style to try to benefit the team, and that's something that you don't always see from a ton of people, and that's what I will always remember the most about Priestahh as a player outside of the actual tournament accolades.
Yeah, he facilitated 2 really championship worthy rosters in that original Atlanta FaZe team, where there's so much talent on that team, with Arcees, who is coming off of a world championship with United with Simp and Abizi, and then to bring in Celium as well, like a guy that he played with on 100T, or not 100T, but he had played against and everything. like all the talent. Like that's a Hall of Fame level roster, and he has to fit into that team where you have like two of the best SMGs of all time. Selim is undoubtedly one of the best ARs of all time, and RC's is a 2-time world champion AR, and like he
He
has
was
to.
Major Maniac.
Oh, is a Major Maniac. Was Priestahh on the LAT team then?
What do you mean?
Who was? So there was.
No, the first phase team was Cell, Simp, Abizi, Major
Oh,
Maniac, Priestahh.
was RC's on Huntsman?
Yeah.
Okay, that's where I was getting confused. But either way, like Major Maniac was like a really great player in his prime, and like he had to fit in that roster. And then obviously, I always find it very funny in a way when guys that are like not near their peak or even close to it. Like Priestahh was not near his peak in 2023 when the Subliners won their world championship. Like he was not in the position that he was in previous years where he could drop numbers and he could kind of be the do-it-all player, especially when he was a sub. And like, yet that's when he wins his world championship. He wins it when he's surrounded by great players again, and he becomes the flex of that NYSL team that has maybe the one of the best submachine gun duos of all time in Hydra and KiSMET, especially like when they were playing at their best. And then Skies, who's been an AR pretty much his entire career, and like he has that where he's able to just fit in, and they win that world championship. And how much that year changed, because a year earlier, like behind the scenes at least, NYSL was a complete shit show, and then he comes in and he's able to help out a team that really needs him. And yeah, that's a really amazing career, and he should feel very proud about it. Shout out to Harry in the YouTube chat for stopping by. I think the only other thing that we should really talk about before we get into the matches real quick is the EWC format, which was officially announced this week. And it's a pretty unusual format. We've seen EWC kind of change some things and experiment with things, and they continue to do so. So this year, in whatever it is, July or August, two groups of 8 teams each, and the group play will be best of 3, which is definitely going to get rankle some players. So basically, teams will play best of 3 matches. So that'll be, was it Hardpoint?
I didn't even realize that's crazy.
Yeah, Hardpoint, Overload, and then S&D, because S&D is almost always the decider.
I think in Challengers they do Hardpoint, S&D, Overload for the best of 3s.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure Bush played a best of 3 when I was watching the watch party for the Challengers event, and they had to win a map 3 Overload to stay alive. Yeah.
So, yeah, so best of 3 group play.
That's crazy.
It's double elimination. So, and I was asking you in the pre-show, and I think what you said is correct, is that basically if you lose twice in group play, then you're officially eliminated. So obviously you could go 0-2, but you could also go whatever it is, 3-2, and then you lose that second match and then you're out. But the top 4 teams in each group will advance to the bracket, which will be single elimination, but best of 7, which is interesting. And then the grand finals will be a best of 9 series. So there's a lot going on here. There's no best of 5, which is like the traditional format of competitive esports, but we get a best of 3 group play, a best of 7 bracket until the finals, which will be best of 9. Your overall thoughts on EWC's format this year?
I mean, I completely, like, I see it in the notes right now, and I just completely glossed over it. I was so locked in on the double elimination like convo with you when we were adding that earlier. Like, I completely just didn't even comprehend this lack of best of 5 thing. I mean, best of 7 single elim is cool, I think, in terms of, I'm pretty sure last year was best of 5 single elim bracket, so that's a slightly better change. If it's going to be single elim, I like BO5, best of 7 over BO5. Best of 3 group play just seems super trolly to me, and I feel like that, in a way, that could be an avenue for some of these challengers teams or amateur teams to pull off an upset over some of the lower CDL teams, so that might make things a little bit more interesting from an upset / narrative perspective there. But yeah, I mean, I like best of 9 finals, if especially for the whole thing. If it was single elim bracket leading up to that. But that's what I've always looked at these EWCs as the sort of experimental ground to try things out. And I guess we'll see how it goes as long as this stands. I would not be surprised, though. This is February 11th. I would not be surprised if before August we hear something about them somehow getting best of 5s in there over best of 3s. I feel like this is something like I had no idea this was a thing. I would be very surprised if a lot of the CDL pros even know this is the format, just based on like I feel like this is just like slid under the rug a little bit, and they might not even think about this until like July / after champs, and then after champs we'll see like optic players or phase players be like, what the hell is this? And then it might get tweaked, but I'm not gonna hold my breath on that. I just think this is another example of why EWC. I think you and I on this pod have done a pretty good job of separating it in our classifications of where it ranks in terms of other tournaments and stuff. It's a big money tournament, but it's not a CDL tournament in my eyes, and it's not to the same pedigree of champs. And I think this is another example of why this is like a tournament where teams just go to try and get as much cash as they can, essentially. But I do, just EWC's credit, I do like some of the changes in the past, most notably with the allowing coaches on stage and stuff. Hopefully, I'm hopeful they let that happen as like a yearly thing where that's the one time coaches are on stage, and we see how that goes. But yeah, best of 3 group play, super freaking trolly. Not sure how I feel about that at all, but I guess we will see in a couple months. We got a long time until we get there.
I kind of hope they keep it. I like random shit just being added into these tournaments. Obviously in the CDL it'd be like, holy shit, like this is crazy, like what you're doing. But EWC, like it's kind of like going to Vegas. Like you're just you know play the roulette wheel and see how things go. And I think that's kind of how EWC is formatted in general. Is just there are some different things you're gonna have to get used to coaches on stage, and whether that actually has like a massive impact or not, we'll see. That's basically what EWC has been doing. I mean, we've seen it all the time. Like single elimination is very weird in general because it's unusual for Call of Duty, but at the same point, like that's what happens. We have not seen best of 3, and I don't even know how long. Like I don't like to. I mean, to show like I didn't even know the format of best of 3 series anymore. So I don't know when the last time we would have seen it. Maybe like we're like 2Ks best of 3 in the early rounds, or 5Ks or whatever. Like maybe like the first few rounds were best of 3s.
They might have been, but I don't even remember.
I mean, it's typically like an online thing, and like most best of 3s would be like best of 3 S&D only. You know, it wouldn't be a best of 3 respawn or variant or whatever it is. So, yeah, I find it cool that they're trying different things. Hey, if you want to go to Saudi Arabia and try to win like $1 million for your team, then you're gonna have to do some weird stuff, and I'm kind of okay with that. Like the tournament doesn't matter to me like really at all, and I think it's like below a major, like in terms of like it means a lot for the money, but other than that, like it's an off-season tournament. It's like a I don't know, like a preseason cup kind of deal. Like it's more important than the preseason, but I don't think as important as a lot of these majors typically are. So it's like major-ish, I guess, for me. But yeah, that's EWC. Now let's get into these matches. We're about an hour and a half in. Obviously, we don't take very long to do the matches anyway. But the matches for the Major 2 qualifiers, which again are completely round robin. So that'll be 11 matches per team. All this is online. The top 10 teams will make it to Major 2. The bottom 2 teams do not, which I found it very interesting that Hex apparently did not know that part of the information, was that the bottom 2 teams did not go to Major 2. And he's like, well, yeah, so if we finish like bottom 2, we're not going to go. And it's like, yeah, that's literally the whole deal with this thing. Like, I don't know how he didn't know that. But Friday, February 13th, speaking of the devil, Optic Texas against the Boston Breach. Boston has been known a time or two to make things hard on top teams. Optic in particular last season. I will go with Optic, but my Breach boys, they have a thing for this.
Yeah, I'll go with Optic too. It is definitely interesting. You kind of mentioned. I think you mentioned it the last time we talked about the Major 2 situations. It's interesting Hex didn't know that, considering the 0-18 stretch for Optic happened last year at Major 2, and I remember you saying, like, if that happened this year, Optic wouldn't be at Major 2. And the absolute shitstorm that would happen online if Optic weren't at Major 2 would be pretty comical. I'm not gonna lie. It would also be like pretty scary to see how it all unfolds. But based on the way Optic played at Major One, I don't think we have to worry about that too much. But you never know. Who I don't think many people expected the 0-18 stretch last year, so anything can happen. And like you mentioned, Boston have been known to pull off some upsets over Optic. I'm gonna go with Optic here though. Also, just on a quick note too, Boston were slightly rumored or some minor rumblings to potentially be looking at changes to Purge and Cammy. It doesn't seem like anything solidified has been reported or whatnot, but technically something could happen over the next 48ish hours to and we could surprisingly have somebody else in the roster. And I think if that does happen, I'm even more confident in Optic in this match. So I think this should be a 1-0 start for Optic in the big qualifiers.
Next up, we have Toronto versus Carolina. Obviously, Toronto doing this role swap before this match. Carolina is probably the most intriguing team of the qualifiers because they were absolutely unstoppable online before Major One. Went to Major One, got pooped on by two teams, including like not a very good team. Like, I mean, I wouldn't say either team was like particularly good. But they looked awful on land, a complete departure from what we had seen just a week before. And so I'm keeping my eyes like completely focused on them because if they fall off the face of the earth, then we know that it was a honeymoon period that they were doing
Yep.
and like whatever. But if they're good online, then we have some real big questions to talk about. I will go with Toronto, and I'm in my belief that this was a honeymoon and that they will kind of crash down to earth again. But man, if Carolina wins, then we're having some weird discussions next week.
Yeah, I'm going with Carolina. Fully invested in the Carol onliners. I said that wrong, but I think it would be pretty funny if they come back and they're just good again online, and then they struggle on land. So I think a couple other teams, this would be a matchup where I'm not even considering picking Carolina, but just both of these teams very heavily underperformed at Major One.
Mm-hmm.
I still believe in the Toronto roster more long term than this Carolina team, but just based on the online results, I'm gonna go with Carolina here.
Yeah, and Toronto's been stinky lately, so they are like they're in the same position, I guess, as Carolina as far as like people really don't believe in them anymore, but Carolina
Yeah.
has at least the online portion where Toronto
Yeah.
fell off the face of the earth toward the end of the Major One qualifiers. Then the last match on Friday is Miami versus FaZe. Certainly going to go with FaZe. Miami did look a little bit better at Major One. They won a few matches, but FaZe coming off of another championship Sunday, and I believe that they're just a better team in general.
Yep, I'm going FaZe too.
Saturday, February 14th, we're starting off with the Riyadh Falcons versus the Paris Genomates. Really love this matchup. Obviously, Paris coming off of winning Major One. The Falcons, they finished tied for first in the Major One qualifiers. Did not have that great of a Major One, though. I will go with Paris, obviously, as I think they are the best team in the league at this point. But the Falcons did prove to be very, very good online toward the end of the Major One qualifiers.
And the Falcons beat Gentlemates in the
Yep.
Major One qualifiers online. So I'm going to go with Gentlemates, but I think this could be a little bit of a trap match here. One that could sneak under the rug for some people who are just like, yeah, Gentlemates won Major One. I'm obviously picking Gentlemates. Falcons know they can beat this team and have done it this year. So a little bit of a potential upset watch here, but I'll go with Gentlemates.
Next up, Optic versus G2 Minnesota. G2 coming in off of a really impressive performance at Major 1, as with Optic. Optic, who looked kind of dreadful at the end of the qualifiers, then went completely flawless through the winners bracket before losing to Paris in the grand finals. I will go with Optic. I think this went to a game 5 the last time these two teams played in the Major 1 qualifiers, if I'm not mistaken, because I think.
Well,
Oh,
they played at Major 1 and
okay.
Optic 3-0'd them.
Yeah. Yeah. So 2-0 Optic so far, but G2 has been pretty good just in general, and they've obviously beaten FaZe, and they have a lot of momentum, at least compared to where they were when they first played each other. So I'll go with Optic, but I think this will be a pretty good match.
I feel like this is another match similar to the Falcons Gentlemates one, where I think most people are going to pick Optic, but the other team could swoop in and cause some chaos here. I'm going to go with Optic, but I think it's going to depend on what G2 shows up. If we get the G2 that have looked super strong against some of these top teams, um, they could do something here. But like I said, I'm pretty sure. Well, I know they played in the winners bracket round 2 of Major 1 because it would have been Optic FaZe, but obviously G2 upset FaZe, and Optic didn't lose a map before the grand finals, so I'm fairly like 99% sure it was an Optic 3-0 over G2, so I gotta go with Optic here.
Next up is Toronto versus FaZe. So we'll get to see how Koi looks like on the first day, and as well as FaZe. But just based on how these teams have been playing over the last 5 or 6 weeks, I have to go with FaZe.
Yeah, I'm picking FaZe too. Um, Interesting to, we were even potentially talking about Joe Thieves being like a domino that could have fallen if FaZe decided to make a move or something, and seemingly not happening at all. But I'm just it'll be a good test here, even if Toronto beat Carolina. I think this will be a really good test for the role swap and everything like that. So. I'm going to go with FaZe, but we'll be interested to see how Toronto matches up.
Last match on Saturday is LAT versus Vancouver, the debut of Nium with the Thieves. This is a great match to debut with. We talked about it. Like, if they had made that change when they could have, it would have been against Optic, first time, and then into the major. But now it's against the second to worst team in the league. Maybe the worst, maybe just not based on record. So I think LAT will win. They just have so much talent on this team that even if Nium underperforms or just doesn't have that great of a match, I think they should be able to beat the Surge.
Yeah, I got to go with LAT too. I wasn't even like really thinking about it from a debut perspective, but that shout out you for mentioning it. That's like something we always talk about in the soft landing spots versus going up against a juggernaut in your first match in the CDL. So, I think this is one that LAT should be pretty comfortable in, but it will be interesting to see how the new team clicks with Nium on the squad.
And Sunday, February 15th, starting off with the Paris Gentlemates and the Miami Heretics. Obviously, going with Paris here.
Yeah, gotta go with Gentlemates.
Falcons versus Boston. We saw these two teams match up, I believe, in the Major 1 qualifiers, if not mistaken. And I'm fairly certain that Falcons definitely won that because Falcons only lost to Optic and LAT, I want to say, their first two matches, and then they won the next 5.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually think that Boston can win, but I think the Falcons will win.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Falcons here as well.
LAT versus Carolina, another good test case for online versus LAN, because when we saw these two teams play online in their last qualifiers match, Carolina wins game 5. When we saw them on LAN, LAT DoorDashed them. Granted, different roster, Nium coming into the lineup now. I will go with LAT, just believing that it was a honeymoon, but again, we will find out pretty soon with Carolina whether it actually was a honeymoon period.
Yeah, so it was, Carolina beat LAT game 5, round 11 online, and then LAT beat Carolina on LAN, but it is slightly different roster. I just said for Carolina versus Toronto, I was going to go with Carolina for online, but I just can't do that, here, even though Carolina did beat LAT online, feels like this would be a pretty easy Carolina pick if you wanted to make that argument. But give me LAT here.
Yeah, it was round 11, game 5. Like, there,
Yeah.
yeah, it could go either way
And
with
that was
that.
the match. I remember it was like pretty funky how it was craze, I believe, like maps 3 and 4 just like got giga stomped on individually statistically, and LAT like absolutely ran those maps. So that was the one I was saying. Like there might have been some server stuff going on, but never got confirmation or anything like that.
And then the last match of the weekend is G2 Minnesota versus Cloud9 New York. Obviously, if this rumored roster for C9 is true, then they will be making their debut on the final match of the weekend. Gonna go with G2. I I literally don't like. I don't know what to expect with the C9 guys. I've never seen any of them play. I might have seen Encourage play, like when they went to, like champs or like challengers finals or something. Like maybe. I really don't know what to expect. It should be really interesting. Maybe C9 will announce their roster. That would be very nice of them. But they have until Sunday to do that. So I'll go with G2.
That's what I was gonna say. I'm taking G2 here too, but yeah, this is the only C9 match of this first week, so they literally have like the maximum amount of time remaining to announce and solidify their roster. Even though we've heard historically like Monday is the roster lock date and stuff, so technically the roster is most likely already solidified, and it just hasn't been announced publicly yet. But yeah, gotta expect G2 to take care of business here against a team that we most likely aren't going to have high expectations for. But I will be interested to see these young guys make their CDL's debuts if the reported roster comes to fruition.
And the C9 was also one of the first teams out of Major 1, so they literally had a lot of time to figure this stuff out. So there's really no excuse anymore. Pick'em so far this season, you are 37-23. I am 38-22, and Trimmer is winless. Please make sure to like, subscribe, follow the podcast feed wherever you're listening or watching on. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, as well as YouTube. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I think our next goal is 300 subscribers, which I think we could get to by the end of the season for sure. You can follow us on Twitter at JBink with 2Ks, at Preston Byers. The podcaster is at Ego Chall Podcast. You can also follow and subscribe on Twitch, twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. And you can follow and subscribe Bink on Twitch, twitch.tv/JBink with 2Ks. And pretty sure the next show will be on February 15th on Sunday, the live show. So if you want to tune in, you could do so on Twitch and YouTube. And then, the feed will be updated Monday morning. So I think that about does it. Obviously, this is one of our longer shows in a while. It makes sense. There was a lot of stuff that happened even like really recently as of yesterday. So we had to fit all of that in. I think Sunday's show will be a little shorter considering we should just have matches to talk about, but we'll see. Yeah, I think that does it for me. Bink, take it away.
Yeah, thank you guys as always for the support. It is worth mentioning we mentioned all of these matches, but obviously, like you alluded to, the longer qualifiers for Major 2 now, with every team playing every other team in these qualifiers. They're doing 3 matches on Fridays, 4 on Saturday, and 4 on Sunday, which means it's 11 matches in total, as opposed to the 9 that we usually see or the 8 that we saw at the end of the Major 1 qualifiers. So it is a couple more matches per week, which means technically we have more to talk about. But yeah, outside of anything else nutty happening over these next couple days, that should be the main focus for the next time we go live. But yeah, thank you guys as always for all the support. Was a eventful episode today, given everything that happened, or the lack of specific roster moves to cover. We still had a bunch to discuss and break down, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. I think we had a couple good rants in there that were some good, clean family fun. But yeah, excited for matches to be back. Although I am disappointed we're not getting any new maps this time around. At least we got Sniper still in the fold for now, and I'm just ready to see some more competitive COD this weekend. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to breaking it all down for you guys on the next show. And we'll see you then. So thank you as always, and remember to send the chow.